My name is Claire Donovan, and for the past 22 years, I've lived and breathed corporate life. I wasn't just an employee. I was the one who arrived before the lights came on and left long after the cleaning crew had locked up. Numbers, strategies, presentations, that was my world. At 49 years old, I was the senior operations director at Kelmore and West, a mid-sized but powerful consultancy firm in Chicago. My job wasn't glamorous, but it was important. I made sure projects didn't fall apart, that clients were happy, and that the younger executives had someone to quietly guide them when their enthusiasm threatened to outrun their wisdom. And I loved it. I loved the quiet rhythm of early morning coffee in my office, the way the city skyline glowed as the sun rose, and the satisfaction of turning chaos into order. But that was before the morning my boss, Ethan Ross, called me into his glass-walled office. Ethan was young, 34, with the kind of arrogance only someone who'd inherited the company from his father could carry. He believed he was a visionary. The truth? He was a salesman. A charming, impulsive salesman who thought long-term planning meant next Friday's cocktail party with investors. That morning, he didn't even look me in the eye when I sat down. He shuffled some papers, cleared his throat, and gave me the kind of polite smile you use on strangers in an elevator. "Claire," he began, "I'm afraid we need to, restructure. The market's shifting, and we need fresh perspectives, younger energy." I remember staring at him, my mind trying to catch up with what he was saying. He didn't drag it out. He think, "It's best if we let you go. Your last day will be today. HR will handle the details." That was it. 22 years, gone in under 3 minutes. I should have felt devastated, and I did. But underneath the humiliation, there was something else. Something odd. Because this wasn't the first time I'd heard whispers about Ethan's real reason for letting me go, and I already knew a secret about Kelmore and West that Ethan didn't think I was aware of, a secret that could change everything. But before I tell you how I went from being escorted out of the building to owning that very company within 24 hours, let me take you back to the small choices, the quiet betrayals, and the seemingly unimportant moments that made it all possible.
It was February, bitterly cold, and our team had just landed the artisan account, a contract worth 7 figures annually. I had personally built that relationship over coffee meetings, late-night phone calls, and handwritten follow-ups. Ethan, of course, took the stage at the company meeting to announce the victory, barely mentioning my name. I didn't care much for the credit until I overheard something in the break room later that day. 2 junior analysts were whispering about a private lunch Ethan had with a rival firm's CEO. The name caught my attention because that firm had been circling Kelmore and West for years, looking for weaknesses. I brushed it off at the time. Corporate politics were always messy. But then, the small things began adding up. Budgets being cut for key client services, confidential files being accidentally left open on Ethan's desk after hours, several senior employees over 40 suddenly restructured out of their roles. By May, I had begun quietly documenting things, not out of paranoia, but because in corporate life, memory is useless without proof. And then one day, I stumbled on a document in the finance server that shouldn't have been there. It was a draft acquisition agreement, a plan for Kelmore and West to be sold to the very rival firm Ethan had met with. The buyer's condition? Key senior staff over the age of 40 to be removed prior to acquisition. I didn't say a word. Not to HR, not to my closest colleagues. Because I had a plan. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told you're past your prime, you're going to want to hear the rest of this story. So make sure you stay with me until the end. Trust me, you won't see the twists coming. The email came at 7:42 p.m. from a name I hadn't seen in over 15 years, Michael Grant. He had been my first mentor, the one who'd taught me how to read a balance sheet like a diary, who said, business is just people wearing masks. Figure out the mask, and you figure out the person. He'd left the corporate world years ago to become a private investor. Now his message was short and intriguing. Claire, I've been watching Kelmore and West from the outside. Call me tomorrow morning before 9 a.m. I have a proposition. I had no idea that by this time tomorrow, I'd no longer be an employee, but something far, far more powerful. The morning after Michael's email, I was running on black coffee and questions. I dialed his number as the city's traffic hummed below my apartment window. He picked up on the first ring. Claire, I'll be blunt. I know about Ethan's deal with Linton Partners. I also know they're lowballing the valuation. He's desperate for a sale, and they're playing him like a fiddle. I went still. How do you know that? Because, Michael said, I'm the one they tried to hire to handle the acquisition, until I realized they were gutting the company before the buyout. And Claire, he paused, they're forcing him to cut senior staff to make the numbers look prettier. That's why you're next on the chopping block. My stomach dropped. I wanted to tell him about the draft acquisition agreement I had found, but before I could, my phone buzzed. Another incoming call. HR. Michael's voice softened. Take the call. Then meet me at 2 p.m. at the Langston Hotel lobby. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what I have to say. It felt like déjà vu, except now the tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Ethan sat there, smoothing his tie, giving me that same empty smile. Claire, I'm sure you've seen the writing on the wall. This isn't personal. Except it is. You're firing me because I'm not 25 with a LinkedIn page full of buzzwords. His smile twitched. We just need fresh thinking. Fresh thinking or cheaper salaries? For a flicker of a second, his eyes hardened, a glimpse of the truth behind the mask. Then he shrugged. You'll get a generous severance. HR is ready to process it. And just like that, security was at my desk, boxing up my life. As I stepped out into the crisp winter air with a cardboard box in my arms, I realized something.
I didn't feel beaten. I felt free. Because Ethan had just given me the perfect alibi for what I was about to do next. Michael looked older, silver hair, deeper lines, but his eyes still had that dangerous sparkle. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, financial records showing Ethan had been siphoning company funds to cover personal debts. Emails between Ethan and Linton Partners negotiating under-the-table bonuses for him if the sale went through quickly. A preliminary offer from another investment group, far higher than Linton's, that Ethan had rejected without informing the board. Claire, Michael said, leaning in, Kelmore and West is worth twice what he's selling it for. The board doesn't know the full story, and they don't know he's violating shareholder agreements by not disclosing other offers. I shook my head. Even if I had the money, what would I do with it? I'm not exactly sitting on millions. That's where I come in, Michael said. I have the capital. You have the trust of the senior staff and the knowledge of how this company runs. We buy it, together. I stared at him. You want me to buy the company that just fired me? He wants us to, he corrected. And Claire, if we move fast, we can close before Linton does. Ethan won't even see it coming. There's a moment in life when all the anger, the humiliation, the loss becomes fuel. And sitting there in that sunlit lobby, I felt the first flicker of fire. While Ethan was probably sipping wine at some rooftop bar, celebrating restructuring, I was in Michael's office downtown, We mapped it out. Step 1. Contact 3 key board members, all of whom I'd worked closely with for over a decade. Step 2. Present Michael's evidence to them, quietly, to force an emergency meeting. Step 3. Leverage the alternative investor offer to outbid Linton and secure a controlling share. The risk? If even one of those board members leaked to Ethan before we secured the votes, he could accelerate the Linton sale and cut us out completely. But the reward? Well, let's just say it would be poetic. At 11:43 p.m., I sent 3 emails, short, precise, and impossible to ignore. Urgent. Meeting request regarding breach of fiduciary duty and undisclosed offers. Confidential. Please respond within 12 hours. Signature, Claire Donovan. And then I waited. By 7:15 a.m., I had 2 responses waiting in my inbox, both from board members confirming they could meet with us. The third was silent. That silence worried me. Michael called. They'll meet us at 9 a.m. in the boardroom. I've reserved the conference line for the one member who's out of the country. We have a 2-hour window before Ethan's weekly investor update call. Walking back into that building less than 24 hours after being escorted out was surreal. Some employees averted their eyes, others gave me subtle nods. They knew something was off about my firing. They just didn't know what. The boardroom smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive paper. Michael sat at the far end, already spreading out the documents. 3 board members joined in person, 1 on video. Ethan was notably absent. He still didn't know about the meeting. I slid the folder across the table. And yet, I'm still a shareholder, which means I have a legal right to bring forward concerns about potential breaches of fiduciary duty. That got their attention. Michael laid out the evidence. Gasps, silence, the sound of someone's pen clattering to the table. "This is damning," Margaret murmured. The decision was swift. Call an emergency full board meeting at 3 p.m. with Ethan present. Freeze any movement on the Linton sale until all offers were reviewed. When Ethan strolled in late that afternoon, coffee in hand, his grin faltered the moment he saw me. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. Margaret's voice was like ice. "She's here because we have questions about your conduct." "Actually," I said calmly, "it does. And as of this morning, I've secured enough proxy votes from shareholders to call for an immediate leadership review." His head snapped toward me. "You what?" "That's right. While you were busy cutting unnecessary senior staff, I was talking to people who actually care about this company's future." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. I turned to the board. Michael and I have put forward a counteroffer to buy out Ethan's controlling shares at a valuation 30% higher than Linton's. Our funding is secured. If the board accepts, the sale can close within 24 hours. And yes, all current staff over 40 will remain employed because they've passed some imaginary prime. Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Ethan, unless you can produce a better offer, we're obligated to consider this one." The trap was perfect. Ethan didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "You think you can just waltz in here after I fired you and steal my company?" "Not steal, buy, at a fair price, which is more than you were about to do to this board, the employees, and the company's legacy." The next morning, the boardroom was packed. Employees lingered in the hallway. Margaret asked, "Mr. Ross, do you have a competing offer?" Ethan opened a folder. Empty. No. 7 in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention. Ethan Ross was out. I walked through the glass doors not as Claire Donovan, former operations director, but as CEO and co-owner. "I'm not going to give a long speech," I told the staff. "You all know me. You know I value skill over age, results over appearances, and loyalty over politics. This is your company as much as it's mine, and nobody here will lose their job because they've passed some imaginary prime. Later that afternoon, I learned the rival investor Ethan had rejected now wanted to partner with us on our terms. Here's the truth. Being underestimated is painful. Being discarded is humiliating. But sometimes it's the push you need to step into a role you never imagined for yourself. If Ethan hadn't fired me, I'd still be grinding away behind the scenes, keeping someone else's dream afloat. Instead, I'm building my own. If you've ever been told you're too old, too late, or too much, remember this. You are never past your prime, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is turn someone else's doubt into your proof. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow for more true, twist-filled stories that prove it's never too late to win.